I looked at the person and was like, look, you have to start, doing what I'm asking you to do, or this is going to keep on happening. You just got to lay it out matter of fact. And you gave them the advice. Do they take it? If they do, great. If not, you can't, always do your best. You know what I mean? If you've known you've done those things, then you shouldn't have to take it personally. I assumed that everybody would want a dog like mine, like messy, like off leash, on command. And some people don't care about that. So why am I pushing them to do something, and then I'm getting frustrated because they're not doing it? They're not, and they're like, I just need my dog to not jump on people and stay on their mat when I answer the door, and that's it.
Hey, everybody, and welcome. So I'm Leanne Chinton from Automation Dogs. Welcome to my podcast. I'm a dog trainer, and I commonly talk with dog trainers and experts who can help dog trainers. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing again Michael Harvey from Canine Coach in Sarasota, Florida. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. So there was one thing, you were on my podcast a week ago, I think it aired, and there was one thing that really stood out. Someone said to me was, I'd I'd never thought about it, how a dog, would resource guard a human. And this was just a non-dog trainer person who had listened to the podcast. And you just gave such a wonderful human analogy. It's like having
Yeah,
a personal masseuse. And of course, the dog is going
yeah,
to be like, this is my private masseuse. I don't want anybody to take him from
yeah,
me. So that was
yeah,
very helpful for people to understand that perspective.
yeah, yeah. When you listen to other dog trainers, they always have like, oh, that makes sense too. But I use that a lot with the people when I consult them, and make them realize that you're ineffectively, you think that you're calming the dog down, but you're actually praising the dog for being in that state. And sometimes, like, with fidget toys, like, people just use their dog as fidget toys. You know what I mean? And just kind of like, the dog's like, hey, why are you stopping? And it's just like this constant vicious cycle of the dog saying, hey, don't stop, don't stop. Okay, I'll keep on petting you.
Exactly, exactly. And it's unconscious. We don't even realize we're petting them half the time. So
Yeah.
that that was a good analogy. Now, today we wanted to shift a little bit because you and I were talking maybe a month ago about burnout and how common it is for business owners to experience burnout, especially dog trainers. And you had
Hmm.
mentioned that you had experienced burnout and found a solution for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I think I was like 8 years into it. So it's kind of around 2009, 2010. I started in 2002. I went to National Canine, and then 2 years later, I went to Sit Me Sit, or No Limitations, what it was called back in the day. And then I started getting busy. I wasn't working a second job. I was doing it full time, and I was just getting client. Back in like 2010 in Sarasota, I was the only one that was really had a name for dealing with the hard cases, the aggression, the fear, the anxiety, and I was starting to get clients that, no matter how much time I spent with them in each session, and told them the next session it was like Groundhog Day. You know what I
mm,
mean? And you know, uh, I've really kind of, when I started getting really into the dog training thing, one of the things is I care about the job itself. And when people hire me, I want to, help them fix the issues. And when you see them not doing it, it starts to become very, very frustrating. And it started, my behavior towards them started coming out, like, like, you could be really harsh, because I was just like, you're saying the same thing over and over again. So it's like, how many times can I say this nicely or word it in a way for you to understand? And I was really starting to like, am I doing the right thing if I'm feeling like this all the time? And I was dating a yoga instructor, and we met after work one time, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, just rough couple of days." And I told her, and she's like, "I got a book for you." And the next time we met, she gave me this book called The Four Agreements, and put a little like in the first page, like hope your journey to wellness, da da da. And it's a quick read. I actually when we planned on doing this, I reread it. It took me like a half a day,
Mhm.
and it just put a lot of things into perspective of what I'm dealing with. If this was job was easy, I'd be out of a job.
Mm.
And I don't know how you want to like because you read it, right? Do you want to go by chapter, or
Yeah, I guess, like, maybe we could start with I listened to it because I don't think I've read a book in 100 years.
I get it?
It Maybe we could start with the name of the book. We're gonna go through it and kinda how it helped you, and I'll give, of course, my take on it. I found it very interesting to read about the author. So, Don Miguel Ruiz, I probably butchered his name, but he was born in a very rural area of Mexico, and he was born to a family of healers, a shaman, and I think a Toltec healer, and then went on to, uh, medical school, which, it's aligned, but it's
Yeah.
not it's more not so natural and spiritual. It's medical school, and I think that he went on to medical school, but then had a car accident and a near death experience at the early age of
Okay.
20.
Well, you really researched it more than I did.
I did, and I always find those pivotal moments in our life, if we're open to them, it can be
Yeah.
you can do such a shift, and I was like, "Okay, yeah, he had a near-death experience," but then when I read he was only 20 when he had a near death experience, I was like, "That's early." Like,
Yeah.
we're not even, like, grown up yet, and then he ended up shifting, I guess, back to, I think becoming a Toltec healer and writing this book. So that's what I found out.
Yeah. So, when you read the book, the part of it is all the chapters work synergistically. You know what I mean? Like, if so, like the first one's be impeccable with your word, and it means don't sugarcoat what you're saying, or don't say things that you don't mean. Um, and that in itself, like when early in my career, if there was something that I got stumped on, I was like, I'd be honest. I'd be like, I have a Swiss Army knife. I'm like, I usually approach it if one thing's not working, I'll go to the next. You know what I mean? I'm just honest with people. I'm like, you know, these cases are tough to do. You just got to dot your I's and cross your T's in the process. And it goes on to say, like it talked about like relationships with kids and stuff. If you say something out of character to your kid, like, do you remember where the mom was frustrated and the child was singing, and she said, "You sound horrible," and the girl never sang again. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so, you know, it taught you how to talk to the people that are in front of you without getting them frustrated through your frustration, right?
Yeah, and
So
it
y-
I
it
was
goes by that being the most important one. Go ahead.
I was just gonna read that first agreement. So, like you said, it's be impeccable with your word, speak with integrity, say only what you mean, avoid using your words to speak against yourself or gossip about others. And I know for
That's another
me,
one.
when, like, I look in the mirror, I'll think bad things about myself. Um, I will definitely find myself gossiping and people be sending me Facebook messages or something, and it's funny, but
Yeah, yeah,
also, it was really good to shine a light on that and be like, "It's not healthy."
yeah, yeah. And like the gossip thing, like you obviously met Bob Jervis from National Canine,
Yeah.
and one of the things he said when you're in business, he's like, you don't talk bad about your competition in any business. And I'm sure people that have worked with me, gone to other trainers and stuff like that, just because the personalities didn't clash or whatever. But when I hear of another dog trainer, I just usually say, I've never seen them work. I'm like, but I'm pretty familiar with what their technique is, and this is why I think this wouldn't work for you. But I wouldn't say, oh, they're a horrible trainer. You know what I mean? That's just, you shouldn't be doing that, right?
Yeah.
The gossip part.
Yeah. I think too, like you'd mentioned earlier about how, it can be very frustrating when you're trying to help someone with their dog and you keep repeating yourself and it gets very sad and very frustrating. So we develop like um I I mean doctors have to develop this too, not the bedside manner, but where you protect yourself and it's almost like you're having just a normal conversation when you're dealing with like a gunshot victim or something, and that's kind
Right,
of how
right.
we have to have that thick skin, but sometimes it gets too thick and, we start having, anger or frustration towards our clients, and, yeah,
Yeah,
we
and it's because the dog's capable of doing what you're asking them to do, and that's like I became a dog trainer because I love dogs. I mean,
Mhm.
they're one of the best pets you could have. In my opinion. Um, and you know, I'm always looking down the road. Like I don't want to see this dog bite somebody and then put into the system and then have to be put down. You know, like the effect that that would have on their family. You know what I mean? And the I wouldn't call it rejection, but like that failure that you take on the weight of. And that's where the second agreement comes in. Don't take things personally. You know what I mean? You want me to go into that chapter?
Yeah, I can read what I have here. Don't take anything personally. What others say and do is a reflection of their own reality, not yours. When you don't take things personally, you avoid unnecessary suffering.
And that's what I was doing. I was taking everything so personally. And when I got to that chapter, is where like I was like, huh, why am I doing this to myself? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you just learn how to like when those things like it just happened to me this week. Third lesson, and I said this. I was saying the same thing I was saying in the last lesson. I looked at the person and I was like, look, you have to start doing what I'm asking you to do, or this is going to keep on happening. You just got to lay it out matter of fact. And, you gave them the advice. Do they take it? If they do, great. If not, you can't, the fourth chapter, always do your best. You know what I mean? If you've known you've done those things, then you shouldn't have to take it personally.
Yeah, I definitely get the racing mind at night, things like that where I'm worried about it and and they're probably at home like not thinking about it. It's not even on their mind, but yeah, we take things so personally. So that was a big one that stood out to me.
Yeah. So, once I started doing that, like, I started feeling better about my position. You know what I mean? And it I got to that desire back. You know what I mean? Instead of like getting a phone call like, oh, here's another aggression case. She's a senior citizen. You know what I mean? Like, and like I want them to like at that stage of life, they need a good pet. You know what I mean? They haven't had a pet in a while. Those are all those things that you got to take into consideration when you're teaching these individuals.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's their reality too. It is, and our reality is so different. So, Yeah, it's not the same.
The yeah, and it's like, oh, my last dog, I've never had a dog like this. So they've been in this habit of having a dog that never had any issues and don't realize that there's a lot of work to be done to get them to be the dog that they are used to, accustomed to having.
Yes. And then do you wanna go into the 3rd agreement?
Sure, that's don't assume,
Yeah, don't make
right?
assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and express what you really want. Clear communication prevents misunderstandings, drama, and conflict. Yes.
Yeah. So that goes to like, asking them the questions like, hey, are you doing this? Are you doing that? You know, if finding like, don't assume that they they might have a really bad schedule at home. And, because I have like a command checklist that I hand out, it's kind of like their syllabus for the program. It says practice 3 to 5 times a day, 10, 15 minutes per session. Well, they might not be able to do 3 to 5 at 10, 15 minutes. I'm like, okay, that's great. Just do 5, right? Don't assume that they're going to be able to implement the time needed, and make sure that they don't start to like, oh, I didn't do it yesterday, and then they start getting snowballed into like, oh, it starts becoming insurmountable, and then you've got to say, hey, take a step back, maybe do 5 minutes, maybe practice without the dog for a little bit and kind of get your movements down. You know what I mean? That way, when you're working with the dog, it's not frustrating you because they don't see the mistakes they're making. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure you dealt with like a husband and wife, and you're sitting there showing them how to do things, and then the wife starts out, and the husband's doing the armchair quarterback, and I'm like,
Yes.
you're going to be next, and you're going to do the same thing. And sure enough, he gets up. I'm like, hey, what happened, man? When you're watching it, it's totally different. But when you got your fur baby at the end of the leash, the anxiety just amplifies, and you think you're going to be able to do a good job, and it's not as easy as we make it look out to, because we've been doing it for a while, and we've you know worked with people that have been doing it for a while and learned from them. You know what I mean?
Yes. I think this agreement made me think about when I read a text message or an email from a client too. I think that when we
Those are the
read
work.
something, yeah,
We put
we
our
read,
our emotions into it, because if it's
yeah,
like short, and you know what I mean, like, are they mad? What did I do?
ex-
You know?
exactly. And I think it's normal to almost read angry, like read like they're yelling. And then we have to make a decision. Do we text them back? Really, they're just maybe they're being sarcastic. But that's where don't assume and maybe make a phone
Hmm.
call to try and figure
Yeah.
out exactly what's going on and ask questions instead of assuming and just coming at that phone call like, I'm just going to give you a solution and an answer based on this little text I read. Maybe asking more questions and listening because you probably are assuming the wrong information.
Right. Right. And then they're like, no, I never thought that. Oh, I read your text, and it's the same thing with relationships outside of dog training. Marriages, boyfriend, girlfriend, it's the same thing. And I started applying to everything. Like, my daughter, like, I'm like, hey, did you hear what I said? Do you understand what I said? So that way, later or the next day, I'm like, we had this conversation yesterday. I told you this, and then you could just chalk it up to being a 12-year-old girl. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was talking with Dave Croyer recently about competing and how stressful and how hard it is to compete. And after a competition, I'd come out and be like, "Oh, I lost a half a point or I lost 4 points." Now, if I said that to you, you'd be like, "Where'd you lose the points, Leanne?" And I'd be like, "On the retrieve," because that's my life. But when my boyfriend Brett asks me, I come out of the trial, I call him, "We won, we're going to the nationals. It's gonna be great. I got a,
Yeah.
199 and a half." And he says, "Where'd you lose that half a point, Leanne?" assuming that he's judging me, and he can't say that. Whereas
Right.
if you asked me that question, I'd be like, "Yeah, on the retrieve, 'cause that's my life." But yeah, I'm
Yeah, he
assuming
was
that
just
he's
asking like what yeah, he was
yeah,
just asking where was the half a point deducted. That's all.
yeah, that's all,
He
and
was
he
asking for
wasn't
information,
judging.
but he wasn't being critical. He wasn't being critical.
Yeah, and that's why I think the lesson for a lot of us too when we compete is we don't train together. I think even, Dave Carr was saying, I have to have an Olympian on my podcast too, but even in, like, the Olympic, um, like, the place where they all kinda are, Olympic Village, I think, spouses I don't
Yeah,
think are allowed because it just adds an extra layer of awkwardness and stress,
sure. Yeah,
pressure. Yeah.
yeah. I bet. I bet.
Yeah, yeah, you need, like, peace. So hopefully that related
Yes,
to the
yes.
3rd one of don't make assumptions, and in personal, but in related to dog training, but that was one that stood out to me as, like, I'm assuming that you're judging me and that you're disappointed in me.
Right, right, right. Because the comfortability of the relationship.
Exactly, exactly. Like, you could ask me, "Where'd you lose the points, Leanne?" And I'd be like, "Well, of course, you know." But if my mom asked me that, I'd be like, "She's disappointed and now I'm grounded."
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know what it is, but you're too close to you can't ask me that.
yeah, yeah. It's funny
So,
because you're like, and that's where you're like, you're looking at the reflection of yourself, like, because you're the one thinking that. You know what I mean? You're the one taking
mm,
that personally.
yes, yes.
Yeah,
Never
and
blame
like,
flirty either.
right, right. Um, I used to do the same thing with Missy. Like, we'd go through a routine, and I'd be like, "We just worked on this," and then I'd have to like look back at what I did, and I was like, "Oh, that was my cue that I missed." You know what I mean? You assume that she knows it and she's going to do it, but if we didn't work that trick earlier, and she hasn't done that trick in a week or something like that, you know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah. So this one
definitely.
can definitely be applied. Don't make assumptions. Um So the next one, the 4th agreement is I really loved this one. Always do your best. Your best will change from moment to moment, but consistently do your best helps you avoid self-judgment and regret.
Yeah, and that, like what I just said about Missy, did I do my best to prepare her for that moment? Did I do my best to the client to prepare them for the next jumping in difficulty from lesson to lesson? You know what I mean? And it talks about like, you're going to be sick, you're going to be not feeling well, and you still got to achieve what you can, and then don't make assumptions, of like, hey, I'm not feeling well, or I didn't get a good night's sleep last night. You know what I mean? And making sure that the client knows that, then you don't have that like, oh, I did a horrible job today. You could always say, hey, let's redo this. I just wasn't, I had brain fog today, which happens a lot.
I think there was something in that chapter about do your best, but don't overdo that best. Am I
Yes,
remembering correctly? Because
yes,
I think that stood out
yes,
to me because sometimes I'll overdo it and then I'm like, I have nothing left.
yes. And that's where the another part of the burnout comes in, because you're trying, it, it, you know, uh, when I was in my infancy of this, I was just like, I was in my mid 30s, you know, had a lot more energy, you know what I mean? And that's where I had to start to realize that I'm trying to get these people to do something, and maybe they can't achieve it, and I have to back out of it, like change the approach to them so they could grasp it and move forward. You know what I mean? So, like you said, if I'm sitting there trying to do my best in that one lesson and trying to cram it, maybe they can't absorb what I'm what I'm trying to get them to achieve. You know, dog behavior, like behavior problems aside, like, I assumed that everybody would want a dog like mine, like messy, like off leash, on command. And some people don't care about that. You know what I mean? So why am I pushing them to do something, and then I'm getting frustrated because they're not doing it? They're not, and like, I just need my dog to not jump on people and stay on their mat when I answer the door, and that's it. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely that one spoke to me, like, you always wanna do your best, um, and I think that that is so important for when you're working with your staff, when you're working with the clients, when you're working with your dog or the dogs. Always do your best, be your best for everybody, and the one that when he dug in a little bit on that and said, "Don't overdo your best." That's where I think it really stood out to me, like I said, because I would just expend
Yeah,
all my energy, like, I just physically
you're
was
depleting the reserves.
everything was all I had. I had nothing left, and then the next client or coming home to, my family, I got nothing
Yeah,
left. That's the
yeah,
burnout right there. I think that 4th
yeah.
agreement was the one that, like, really hit home for me because 'cause I'm like, "I gotta tone it down a little bit here because I'm not a balanced best."
Right. And that's where the don't take things personally thing comes in too, because you were taking it personally to do your best, and you didn't have, like, you know what I mean? You didn't know how to self-regulate that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're like, "Oh, I'm depleting myself," and then you're still getting like the same results. You know what I mean? And that starts to wear on you.
Yeah. And there's some tough cases too, like, some I talked to a dog trainer the other day, and this dog can't even go outside. He won't go to the bathroom outside. Like, this dog is a mess. When he goes outside, he tries to drag the little old lady back to the house, and it's like, it's consuming this dog trainer. Like, all the other clients are getting this, and this one lady is getting, like, everything he's got. So I could see where
Yeah.
that could lead to burnout.
Yeah. Like Rosie, that we when we did the Zoom call, I showed you Rosie, and I
Oh,
had her for
yeah,
like
the
3
little
extra weeks.
white fluff ball.
And there was, like, right at the 3-week mark, I called him. I was like, "Hey, I need a break. Let's send her home for a little bit, see
Yeah.
how things go." And then I took her back for a week and a half right before they went back up to DC. And I totally needed it because I was giving her everything. You know what I mean? I was just constantly like, "Okay, what can I do to get her out of the next layer of her shell today?" And I was putting all that into her, and I had to save stuff for the other dogs I'm working with, my own personal dogs, a
I've
new
u
dog.
I've used that technique too and inadvertently learned from it, giving the dog success where I would be like, I've got this board and train here. I'm gonna send them home because they're at their end of their board and train. And then when they come back for boarding, the dog's like dragging to me and like, it's Aunt Leanne, I'm at my second home. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is the same dog, but I don't know, it's just something in them. They go back home and then they come back to me and they trust and everything that we worked on, it's just magic. And that was
Yeah,
a trick
yeah. This guy's
that I really, like, learned from because the dog told me. So I love that where, you may have to find that solution, send them home, get a break, but then when they come back, they trust you more. They're
charged.
like, "I got this."
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like when I do boarding trains and it's an anxiety case, like, can we come meet see the dog? And for a while, I'm like, I don't think it's a good idea because, I might take some steps back if you come. And then, I kind of let go a little bit. I'm like, yeah, sure, come. And then, like, the visit actually helped the progress, because the dog was like, oh, I'm not staying with you for the rest of my life. Okay.
Yes.
My other family's still in the picture. And then, like, for whatever reason, it helped that the rest of the boarding train go a lot smoother. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, and that is a good one that a lot of us dog trainers stick to. We just don't want the owner. But I used to work in veterinary emergency and critical care, and people would come in and visit their dogs when the dogs were in the hospital, and everything was fine. No one blew up. If anything, maybe it probably helped, them have their mom and their dad and their blanket and their things that they knew. So, yeah, maybe being a bit more open to that might be a solution to actually help.
Yeah, every dog's different and every
Mhm.
situation's different. It, you know, if you don't have the, with Rosie, she was 3 years at a breeder, and this is where I have to assume from what I saw her behavior that she was just isolated in a crate for 3 years, and I had to approach it that way. And the owners only had her for about a month before they came to me, so there wasn't like this strong connection. Whereas the dog would have been like, "Oh my God, you're taking me home, you're taking me home." But if it's
Yeah.
a dog that was 7 years old and they've had since a puppy and they waited 7 years to actually change and do something about it, and they wanted to like, well, no, that would be a situation where I'm like, I don't think it's a good idea. Let me just get through this, and you'll have
Yeah.
your dog back in a better situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the one of the big takeaways that I took with this book, and it just happened by accident, I guess, because I knew we were doing the podcast. So I I kept the knowledge I learned from the book with me. A lot of times I read a book and I'm like, "I'm gonna implement everything. This is amazing." And then I move on to the next book or the next podcast and I'm like, "This is great." And I
Yeah.
didn't take the time to put in the work and make this a lifestyle like I have done with, James Clear's Atomic Habits. I read that once a year minimum. I live that book. Um, this is another book that I'm gonna have to practice as a way of life because I
They
was
have a little, they have a little mini version,
okay.
like it's like a pocket size. My dad has it sitting in his bathroom. So every time I went to the bathroom, I'm like, oh, my dad has a mini version of the book I love.
Did he get the book
Yeah. So, and
because of you?
no, like he had it because he's in addiction specialist and stuff like that. He was, early in his life, he had addiction issues, and now he's like a sponsor, and he just went back to school in the 70s to get certified to be, when these people come out of the 28 day or whatever, 30 days, he helps them transition into getting back into life and stuff like that. So, he's obviously, goes to church and stuff like that, but it was funny that he had that book because like I think he mentioned it on Larry Crohn's podcast about it being religious, but I thought it was more spiritual, especially when he
Is
said,
yeah.
like you are a reflection of God. When you look in that mirror, you know what I mean, and what you see God is what how you see yourself.
Yes, and I'm glad you said that because I talked to my mom last night. She's in book club all the time. She is, very churchy, and I said to her, "I'm gonna be talking about this book, The Four Agreements." And she was like, "No, it sounds like it's spiritual, Leanne. They're not talking about Jesus and stuff like that. It's spiritual." So
Yeah,
she's like, it's important you make that differentiation." And I think that is important too for folks listening that, yeah, this isn't a
yeah,
religious
and
book.
and like what it also talks about is we're taught fear at an early age, especially when it comes to certain religions, like, oh, you're going to go to hell if you do this, you know what I mean? And puts you in this box of fear. And that's what I really liked about it because there wasn't anything like judgment, you know what I mean? Like of rules that somebody else put forth, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
did you ever read The Secret or anything like that?
it sounds familiar, but I don't think I did. But it sounds
The
like
Secret, it's
oh, go ahead.
kind of the same thing as the Four Agreements, but it's like what you put out in the universe comes back. And that's kind of the way I see the spirituality is like, there's something out there that created all this. I got to be aware of that. And what I put out, I'll get in return. So if I put out, like if I sit there and abide by these four agreements and I'm not assuming and causing, unhealthy relationships because I'm doing things outside of it that are detrimental to it, like not assuming that I know what they were talking about and then, having a conflict later, you know, and, the impeccable word, like, don't like, I, I hate pretending, pretending to be somebody I'm not, or saying things that I know aren't true. Like, when we did the podcast last time, we were talking about bands at the end and stuff. And I went out to Biloxi to see, my favorite band, Candlebox. And, when my hair is down and like, I got short sleeves on, my tattoos are out and I wear like my Ray-Ban tinted glasses everywhere. So I look like I'm in a band. And we went to the hotel where the band was at, and we were at this bar, and like that, my friends were like, "Hey, man, let's tell them that you're from Candlebox and get this VIP table." And I'm like that's not really my thing. And then I was just like, I didn't want to be a party pooper. I'm like, okay, you guys could sit there and string the song, but if they ask me to go up and play on the band, I'm going to the bathroom and I'm not coming back.
That's super funny. Well, that sounds fun. Um, so I just wanted to share too, because you know, I jumped ahead after I read the 4 agreements, and they have a book called The Fifth Agreement, and I'm in the
Yes,
process
yes,
of listening to it now, and I am enthralled because it really talks about domestication and how, as, children, we have to learn a language and things like that, which is totally our jam because we're dog trainers and we domesticate and we teach a language to these animals, and so that's the one I was like, I'm, like, listening to that book closely.
funny you said that because I have it sitting on my dresser, and I'm like, I really got to read that. And then when I reread it to prepare for this, I'm like, okay, it's on my docket
Yeah.
to read that.
Yeah,
I'm
I
glad
think that
you said that because now I want to, now I'm really going to read it.
yeah, there was definitely, like, the 4 agreements, the always do your best one was the one that stood out to me, and then the 5th agreement, I am just beginning it, and, yeah, I really it was aligned with the things that excite me, which is like the psychology of a human and a dog and language and things like that. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We teach people, we teach dogs, and yeah, that one's standing out. So we'll have to have a podcast 2.0 about that one once we finish
Okay.
it.
Okay. I'll read it. Um. Yeah. And let me kind of talk about like the power of the book because like it did something so much for me. Like anytime I would get wind of a friend that was having something going on in their life, I'd like, hey, what's your address? And I'd send them the book. It's $7 on Amazon. You know what I
Mm,
mean? And you mentioned Fort Myers. I have a lot of friends down there, and one of the guys I knew, he was like in one of the bands that played at my bar all the time, and he had just broken up with his girlfriend. And they were going. I thought they were going to be the super couple, right? I asked him what his address was. I sent him the book, and like 2 years later, I run into him at a concert up in Tampa, and he was like, "Hey, what's up, man?" He's like, "Thank you so much for that book." And he's like, now whenever my friends are in, he's like, I pay it forward. So now I keep like a couple copies in my car.
wow.
You know what I mean? Like, hey, here you go. I mean, like whatever helps, and it's just like it's one of those things. It's not like a hard read. You know what I mean? And if you could
Oh,
put
yeah.
those four things, like things start to become a lot clearer.
Yeah, I think, Post-it
Unnecessary
notes.
suffering is what I think is what he said.
Yeah, Post-it notes on the bathroom mirror so that consider them every day
Yeah.
and center yourself. Because, yeah, I mean, just to shift a little bit, one of the big things I talk to with dog trainers is that they hate sales and they feel like I got to drop my prices. I have imposter syndrome. I can't sell, and it's a mindset because they can do this. Um, but maybe we could just dive into a little bit of how the 4 agreements could help you if you're struggling with your evals or your consultations.
So, are these trainers like just starting out, or they've been doing it for a while?
Kinda just starting out, having that natural ebb and flow of, us in this world. It's busy, it's not busy, it's busy, and wondering what it is. Oh, maybe it's my sales, and really, it's that you just didn't have the leads coming in. It wasn't you. It wasn't your closing rate. It wasn't that part of the process, and feeling that imposter syndrome. And, I think that people can read that in us when we've been told no a few times, and then we start to assume the no,
Yeah,
and we don't have the confidence that we need for a sale.
it just comes in waves. When I started going out to Vegas, I had like a 1 week where I had like 6 or 7 demos and I didn't sell not one of them. And I called Alfredo and I was like, dude, am I losing my mojo? You know what I mean? And he was like, look, man, he's like, just keep on doing what you're doing. You know, if, what they got to realize is it just happens like that. Like it's nothing that they're doing wrong. Are they showing their dog, what they can do? Are they uh, taking their dog after the consultation and working with the dog to show them the impact? Because if you don't, then you're not giving them, you're giving them confidence. You're giving them confidence of what they can do, and not like, oh, I'm going to put a couple $1,000s in this guy, and he didn't really show me anything that makes me convinced. You know what I mean? And that's where like now I do my consultation. I'm not like, you know, uh they say, I'm not sitting there pushing for the sale, you know what I mean, the close or whatever like that. I'm like, hey, take your time. I know it's a financial decision, and the majority of them call me at some point, say I'm ready. You know what I mean? But again, you don't take it personally because they didn't do it. Some of those people, it takes them months to even
Yes.
call a trainer. You know what I mean? And they're just like, it might be just, I'll just accept the dog for what it is. I mean, there's a bunch of dog owners that are like that. It is what it is. There's no hope for them. You know what I mean? Yeah, I talked to a trainer, but they're kind of the wishy-washy type, and they kind of come in threes in groups. You got 7 clients in a row that are ready to do it, and then you got the 7 clients in a row that it kind of just aligns up that way.
Yeah. And that's where it's like, don't make assumptions. Just because you've had 3 that weren't the right fit for whatever reason, they weren't ready, don't make assumptions that when you get in front of that next person, that you're on a bad streak. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. I think, you know, we can always better ourselves to be that perfect best at sales, leaning into taking classes, reading books on sales, to always be doing our best to help in that
Yeah,
specific
yeah.
area.
Dave Skaletsky and Darren Shepard, remember them?
Yeah.
So we used to buy like training videos and we record them and then send them copies to everybody, so we'd all have them. We are always sharing like Zig Ziglar and what was that one about attitude that I really liked? I forget the name of it, but like you know, getting into those kind of groups and
Mm,
having people help you with those things. And I remember when I first started out, I would just be skipping over my words, or I'd like sit there and say something, and I would, my mind would redirect, and I'm like, why am I telling this story? Where did I leave off the original
yeah.
story? You know what I mean? I think that was a lot to do with my ADD. But keep it simple, you know what I mean? And just like say the statement and let them give you the feedback. You know what I mean? Like if
Yeah.
you're just talking over that, like sometimes it's just a matter of having done it so many times, you're in your own zone and you're comfortable with it. You know what I mean? I remember like the first couple of years, I was shake like underneath the table. I'm like, I was so nervous. I'm like, yeah, and then, you know what I mean? But it's just one of those things you got to kind of just step in it and go through the trials and learn how to communicate and yeah, learn what to say to to the type of person that is across from you, because the person before them might have had to approach it a little bit different. And that, again, it's experience, you
It's
know?
experience. Yeah. Just like competing, if I walk onto the field and I'm shaky, like I've been where my legs are shaking, I can't even walk and my knees are buckling. And I'm like, I don't even know why I signed up for this. But then the next trial gets a little easier and the next one gets a little easier. Yeah, experience is a big one. I think what you said too about like having that community with Dave and Darren and just like supporting each other, sending the books to somebody that needs it. I'm thinking of somebody right now that I know that something that she's just going through and I barely know her, but I'm like, I want to send her this freaking book because
Yeah, like,
wow.
do it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You know, because
Yes.
that all that stuff is just lifting everybody up. You know what I mean? And the dog training community can be really harsh.
Yes.
I think I have one trainer who's a food trainer, and he's a really great guy. He's a really great trainer, and he's a realist. And like, when he knows he can't solve an issue, he's like, "Here, go see this guy. He specializes in it." You know what I mean? That's another. I don't know why we keep on talking about Bob Jervis, but
Uh,
I remember when I was in his school, and he was like, "What's the only thing that two dog trainers will agree upon?"
what the
And he
third
goes,
one's
"What the
doing
third
wrong.
one's doing wrong."
Yeah, we all know that one. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah,
why schools people gravitate to them and, with me and, developing, like Sit Means Sit and turning it into a franchise, that just felt like, the natural progression, like, all of us wanted to have, like, this family and this community, um,
yeah,
so, yeah, National Canine, like, we're the same.
yeah, yeah. And like, like the IACP conference. That's where I really started branching out, because I was getting, that's where I got introduced to the No Limitations of Robin McFarland. And then I watched her husband do a segment on branding, and that's where I came up with my logo. You know what I mean? From just having that experience, and then you're sitting at having lunch with people that are dog trainers, and they're like, "Oh, I never thought of that." And you're just adding other people's experience to your own and getting those wrinkles ironed out. And the more you do that, it's like, it's been a while. I think my last ICB conference was 2018. You know what I mean? And I'm
Yeah,
due to do something just to kind of get that freshness back. You know what I mean? But that's what I would tell people is, like, get around other communities. You know, don't think that what you're doing is the be all end all, because there's always a different perspective, like
yeah.
the 24-hour masseuse. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it absolutely. It takes a village. And I know
Yeah.
from joining my dog sport club and we all as a team were trying to get, certain people in the club to the world champion level. It's like, okay, there's 3 of us with the dog and the desire and some money and the whole club just that takes a village to get us to that world level. And it's the same with our business too. Like it takes a village. We can't do this by ourselves. We need the books, we need the community in order to get ourselves to that next level, not get stuck and burned out.
We need our automation dog software.
I really like the Wednesday meetings. So not many people know about the Wednesday meetings that we have, but it's turning into quite like a club. On
Yeah, I just had, like, the last couple Wednesdays I haven't been able to do it. I'm still on the workflow one. I was just working on that before we logged on, and we could talk about that after the podcast. I got some little questions, because it's like, I got the workflow set up, and then I save it, and then it reverts back to what it generated initially. And I changed it to what I wanted to read. And then as soon as I hit save and I do the test, it goes
Oh,
back
oh,
to,
okay. I think I know what you're doing. We'll look at it right after this podcast. Yeah, but I
yeah,
love the community, we have trainers stepping up like yourself to speak on the podcast or to speak in our little club that meets on Wednesdays. Jim Clausen, do you know Jim from up in Boise,
Sounds
Idaho?
familiar.
Yeah, he did like a Russell Brunson course and made updates to his programs and his pricing. And since he did that shift, he's consistently having like $11,000 days. He's going to be speaking, I think, on April 22nd to our little group so that everybody can learn from what he has to share. I've got another one scheduled who's going to be teaching on sales. Jim is also amazing at sales, but Lauren Bennett's going to be speaking from Walking with Walter on, I think, May 6th. So we have lots of, leaders coming up.
I watched Walking the Walter one.
Yeah, he's going to be speaking on sales, and he's just so Jim is as well. Like it doesn't sound slick, sounds kind, and that's yeah, they're just going to be so great to learn from. Yeah, I think but back to, like, it takes a village. We need support of each other that's been through it. Like, Mike, you've been in this for as long as I have. Like, I've been doing this for 34 years and, I wanna help others
Wow.
and,
Yeah.
I need help. So it takes a village. And if something we do or say can help someone else not go through as much pain that sometimes it takes to go through it when you're building this kind of business, you know,
Like I said, those little epiphanies that come out of nowhere just because you're around other dog trainers. Like I said, it's like, when you're in your community where you live, you're not going to be having conversations with other dog trainers. Unless you have like see them at an expo or something like that, and then you're just like, "Hey, how you doing?" You don't really talk shop because you don't want to like have them have your trade secrets and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things we wanna be able to share. I have another, I've reached out to couplepreneurs, if I'm saying it right, and they
Who?
couplepreneurs, like
What was it?
entrepreneurs, but
Okay,
couplepreneurs,
okay,
and I reached out to them to ask them
okay.
to be on the podcast because I I think they've found a really cool niche where a lot of these mom and pop shops, like dog trainers, we're running a business and it's like couples and we end up wanting to kill each other. It's a hard thing to navigate and be like, a couple and run this business together. So that's an area that I was hoping an expert would come in and teach on because it's hard and a lot of families are doing this dog trainer thing and yeah, it's rough.
Yeah, yeah. And there's like people in my since I've been here that have been here before me, and it's like they do a lot of boarding trains, and like I get feedback, and it's just like I can't believe they're like I'm like I wish I could talk to them and say, hey man, you're giving all of us a bad name. Like,
Yeah.
step up. If you're gonna, you've been doing it for this long. Yeah, looks like my laptop is about to die.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Always be your best, the 4th agreement. So,
Always been.
yeah,
Yep.
don't
Yep.
don't do that. It's giving everybody a bad name and it's not good for the dogs. Be good to the dogs, be good to your clients, be good to your staff, and be good to yourself.
Hmm. Amen.
Yep. Well, we're at the top of the hour almost. So, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No. You know, get the book.
Yeah.
$7.
Yeah. Audiobook.
And
It's
it's
like
not. It's
quick read.
I can't do audiobook because something will distract me, and I'll miss what they said. That's why I have to read it. You know what I mean? It's why I like
Yeah.
if I'm watching like a TV series, I have to put my phone away because then I'll be like, "What did they just say?"
Yep.
And I have to rewind and be like, "Oh, I missed a crucial part of it." So that's why I can't do audiobooks. I do podcasts and stuff like that. Like that's one of the things like your podcast I've been really diving into,
Thank
especially
you.
because YouTube has gotten my algorithm, so now I'm getting all kind of dog training things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like the Michael, who'd you refer? Michael
Michael Ellis. Michael Ellis.
Ellis, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, like
The
And it,
goat.
like he's got all like he's on all these podcasts, and I'm just like, oh my god! And he's such a wealth of information. It's like again saying things that you didn't think of, thinking it in that perspective. And the more perspectives you have, then you could sit there and share those perspectives for somebody that might have that thing, and it clicks for them the way you worded it. You could sit there and try it 5 times of a certain perspective, and then you say it that one time, and you're like, yes, now I get it.
Mhm.
Thank God, because I was running out of analogies.
Yep, yeah, definitely a lot of good advice there, like leaning into learning from others, to make ourselves better.
Yeah,
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for this very unique podcast. I hope that someone listening
awesome.
can get the book if, they're wanting to stay ahead of the burnout, or if they're in the burnout, that they can get the book and it'll help them through it. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
excellent.
you know, do things outside of the dog training that like I always do long weekends every like once or twice a year. I'll meet up with some people, like we'll pick a destination in the band and like, all right, we're meeting here, and you kind of let it out, you know what I mean, have a good time and come
Mm,
back refreshed, ready to go to work. You know, down you'll start to see in Florida we're real seasonal too, so that like I always know where to take my breaks, especially in August, because August and September it gets slow here, and that's where it's really hot. So that's where I'm going to like Asheville and places that are like in the mountains. So it's Colorado, stuff like that.
smart. Yeah, take a break. And that's good advice because us entrepreneurs, we're like control freaks, and yeah, it's tough to take a break. The good thing too with like when I was I think I was in November, I was at a conference or a seminar, professional canines conference in Ohio, and Bobby Publico was there. He's one of my clients from Vegas, and he was just sitting there listening to the keynote, Justin Rigney, and he leaned over and he's like, "Hey, Leanne, I booked like 3 or 4 consults just during the keynote here, like all because of your system. So you can take that break, but the automation is doing the work for you, so that you aren't
Right,
missing out
right.
on, running, having
And that's
money to run
like
your life."
now that I'm starting to get into the things to cater it to what I need, it's gonna like like I'm always following up after the first lesson, and so I'll have it in my schedule, and then the whole day will go by, and I totally didn't see it on my schedule. I'm like, oh, I totally forgot to do that. And now that I could have a system that does it for me and know that it's out there, I won't take it personally that I screwed up. You know what I mean? Like, damn it, my
Totally get.
ADD strikes again.
Awesome. Well, it was such a unique and great talk. I hope it helps somebody. Thank you again,
Yeah,
Mike. And thank you,
yeah.
listeners.
Anytime, anytime.
Yeah, well,
And
definitely the fifth agreement. Awesome.
all right, cool.
Well, thank you, listeners. Thank you, Mike. This was such a unique and great conversation. And again, I'm Leanne Shinton from Automation Docs. And yeah, get the book.